The car wouldn't start. Zvi Aharoni pumped the ignition 3 times. Nothing. He checked his watch. Eichmann would walk past this corner in 4 minutes. The entire operation hinged on those 4 minutes. Peter Malkin sat in the back seat. His hands were wrapped in bandages, fake injuries to explain why he couldn't help if someone stopped. The real reason was different. His hands needed to be ready, clean. No hesitation when the moment came. Aharoni tried the ignition again, a grinding sound. Then silence. Across the street, 2 team members posed as a couple. They were the backup. If the snatch failed here, they'd try at the bus stop. The bus stop plan was worse. Too many witnesses, too much light. 3 minutes. Eichmann left his job at the Mercedes-Benz factory at the same time every evening. 7:40 p.m. exactly. He walked the same route, down Garibaldi Street to the dirt road. Then, half a kilometer to his house. German precision hadn't left him. It made him predictable. Predictability was fatal in his line of work. Former line of work. The Mossad had been hunting him for 15 years. Dead ends in Egypt. False leads in Syria. A tip from Germany finally broke it open. His son, Klaus, had been dating a girl. The girl mentioned her boyfriend's father. A German who worked at Mercedes. A German who rarely spoke about his past. Aharoni turned the key one more time. The engine coughed. Died. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. The couple across the street maintained their act. They couldn't help. Breaking cover would abort everything. 2 minutes. The house at Garibaldi Street 14 held Adolf Eichmann, the man who organized train schedules. Not weapon shipments, not troop movements. Train schedules for humans. Hundreds of trains. Millions of people. The paperwork had been meticulous. The bureaucracy of genocide required an architect. Eichmann had been that architect. Now he went by Ricardo Klement. He worked in a factory. He lived in a shanty house with a tin roof. His wife Vera had joined him 3 years earlier. The neighbors thought he was quiet, polite. Just another German immigrant in Buenos Aires. The Israeli government had a problem. Argentina wouldn't extradite him. The legal channels were closed. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion made a decision. Bring him back anyway. Make it look like he came willingly. Let the world see him on trial in Jerusalem. 1 minute. Aharoni pulled a screwdriver from the glove box. He jammed it under the dashboard. The wiring was simple. He'd stolen dozens of cars in his career. Never one that mattered this much. His fingers found the ignition wires. He stripped the coating with his teeth. Malkin leaned forward. He could see the end of the street. The darkness swallowed everything beyond the factory lights. Eichmann would emerge from that darkness. A 54-year-old man, average height, thin, glasses. He looked like an accountant. He had been an accountant of death. 30 seconds. The wires sparked. The engine turned over, caught. Aharoni eased off. Too much gas would flood it. The engine settled into an idle. He shifted into first gear. The car rolled forward 3 meters. He stopped at the exact position. The streetlight above them was broken. They'd broken it themselves 2 days earlier. A figure appeared at the end of the street. Malkin tensed. The figure walked with a slight stoop. Left foot dragged a fraction. An old injury from the war. The Mossad files documented everything. This was him. Eichmann walked closer. He carried a briefcase. Always the briefcase. His son had confirmed this detail. Inside were technical manuals, Mercedes maintenance procedures. Eichmann took pride in his work. Any work, even this one. Malkin opened the door. He stepped out. His movements were casual. A man stretching his legs. The bandages on his hands caught Eichmann's attention. People always looked at injuries. It was human nature. 10 meters. The team had practiced this moment 40 times. An abandoned airfield outside Buenos Aires. They'd used a dummy. Same height as Eichmann, same weight. Malkin could grab the dummy in 3 seconds, pin him in 5, have him in the car in 8. The record was 6 seconds total. They needed to beat 6 seconds. 5 meters. Malkin turned. He faced away from Eichmann. His posture said he was waiting for someone. Non-threatening. Eichmann's pace didn't change. The German kept walking. He was thinking about dinner, about the technical manual he'd been reading, about anything except the fact that 3 Israeli agents were within striking distance. 3 meters. Aharoni killed the headlights, the agreed signal. The couple across the street began walking. Their job was containment. If Eichmann ran, they'd intercept. If anyone came to help, they'd interfere. Run out the clock until the car was gone. 1 meter. Malkin spun, his left hand shot out. He grabbed Eichmann's lapel, the fabric bunched in his fist. Eichmann's eyes went wide, his mouth opened. Malkin's right hand clamped over that mouth. The scream died before it started. Eichmann dropped the briefcase. His hands came up. He clawed at Malkin's arm. His fingernails drew blood. Malkin didn't feel it. Adrenaline had erased everything except the mission. Get him in the car. Keep him quiet. Don't kill him. No. Ben-Gurion wanted him alive. The trial needed him alive. The German was stronger than expected. He twisted, broke partially free. His elbow caught Malkin in the ribs. Pain exploded. Malkin held on. His training took over. He pivoted, used Eichmann's momentum against him. The German stumbled. The couple arrived. The man grabbed Eichmann's legs. The woman opened the rear car door. 4 hands now controlled Eichmann. He still fought. His glasses fell off, clattered on the pavement. The woman kicked them into the darkness. 6 seconds had passed. They were behind schedule. Malkin drove his shoulder into Eichmann's chest, forced him toward the car. Eichmann's head hit the doorframe. A dull thud. He went limp for a moment. Just a moment. They shoved him inside. Malkin piled in after him. The woman slammed the door. Aharoni hit the gas. The tires spun, found traction. The car lurched forward. Behind them, the street stayed empty. No witnesses, no alarm. The factory lights illuminated nothing except the briefcase. It lay open on the dirt. Papers scattered around it. Maintenance manuals for Mercedes engines. In the back seat, Eichmann came to. His eyes focused. He saw Malkin's face, saw the determination there. He stopped struggling. His lips moved against Malkin's palm. German words. Muffled, indistinct. Malkin leaned close. He needed to hear, needed to know if this was really him. 15 years of hunting. It had to be him. He lifted his hand slightly, gave Eichmann room to speak. The German sucked in air. His voice came out hoarse, broken, but clear enough. Ich bin Adolf Eichmann. I am Adolf Eichmann. The confirmation changed everything. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. No innocent factory worker grabbed on a dark street. The architect of genocide sat in their back seat, bleeding from his forehead, his shirt torn, but alive. Malkin pressed his hand back over Eichmann's mouth. They had 12 kilometers to the safe house, 12 kilometers through Buenos Aires. Every police car was a threat, every checkpoint a potential disaster. The car had no diplomatic plates, no protection. If they were stopped, the operation collapsed. Aharoni turned left, away from downtown. The safe house was in the suburbs, a villa near the airport. The team had rented it 3 months earlier. Cash transaction, false names. The owner asked no questions. Argentine real estate worked that way. Money talked. Origins didn't matter. Traffic thickened. Friday night in Buenos Aires meant crowds, restaurants, bars, people everywhere. Aharoni maintained normal speed. Too fast would attract attention. Too slow would trap them in the city when the alarm went up. Eichmann's wife expected him home by 8:15. She'd start calling people by 8:30. Police would be notified by 9 o'clock. They had 90 minutes. The safe house held the rest of the team. 8 people total. A doctor to examine Eichmann. A forger to create documents. 2 interrogators to confirm his identity. 3 security men to guard the perimeter. Everything was ready. The El Al flight that would take them home was scheduled for May 20th. 10 days away. 10 days of keeping Adolf Eichmann hidden in Buenos Aires. 10 days of preventing Argentine authorities from finding them. 10 days of maintaining absolute operational security. One mistake would end it. The Argentine government would intervene. Eichmann would disappear again. Or be released. Or be killed by Nazi sympathizers who wanted him silent. The car crossed into San Fernando. Safer territory. Fewer police. The roads degraded into dirt paths. The villa appeared ahead. White walls, red tile roof, lights off. Exactly as planned. Aharoni pulled into the driveway. The garage door opened. Someone inside had been watching. The car rolled in. The door closed behind them. Darkness swallowed everything. Then flashlights clicked on. Faces appeared. The team surrounded the car. Malkin opened his door. Eichmann tried to bolt. Malkin yanked him back. 3 men grabbed the German, pulled him from the car. His feet dragged on concrete. They moved him into the house, through a kitchen, down a hallway, into a bedroom at the rear. The room had no windows. 1 door, a bed with restraints, a chair, a table, medical supplies on the table. The doctor stepped forward. He was older, 50s. He'd treated wounded soldiers, torture victims. He knew how to keep people alive under difficult conditions. They strapped Eichmann to the bed, wrists, ankles, chest. He didn't fight anymore. Shock had set in. His skin was pale, his breathing rapid. The doctor checked his pulse. Normal. Checked the head wound. Superficial. He cleaned it with antiseptic. Eichmann winced but stayed quiet. Aharoni entered. He carried goggles, blackout goggles, part of the plan. Eichmann couldn't see faces, couldn't identify locations. Later, when lawyers got involved, when questions came, Eichmann would testify that he'd been treated well, that he hadn't been tortured. The goggles were insurance, protection for everyone. They fitted the goggles over Eichmann's eyes, secured the strap. The German was blind now, trapped, helpless. Everything he'd made others feel. Every person loaded onto those trains had felt this same helplessness. The historical irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Malkin left. He went to the bathroom, washed the blood off his hands. Eichmann's blood, his own blood. The mixture ran pink in the sink. He looked at his reflection. 24 hours of surveillance. 40 practice runs. 15 years of hunting. It was over. The operational phase was complete, but something bothered him. Eichmann had confirmed his identity too easily. No denial, no protest. Just 5 words. Ich bin Adolf Eichmann. Men running for 15 years didn't surrender in 5 words. Trained SS officers didn't break in the first 5 seconds. Something was wrong with the response. Malkin dried his hands, walked back to the bedroom. The team had left. Only the doctor remained, monitoring the prisoner, making sure he stayed stable. Malkin stood in the doorway, watched the man on the bed, the man who'd sent his sister to Auschwitz. His nephews, his nieces, all dead in camps that Eichmann's trains had supplied. The doctor looked up. He recognized something in Malkin's expression. He stood, left the room, gave them privacy. Malkin stepped inside, closed the door. The lock clicked. He approached the bed, leaned down. His mouth was inches from Eichmann's ear. "You admitted who you were too fast," Malkin said in German. "Why?" Eichmann's jaw tightened. The goggles hid his eyes, but couldn't hide the tension in his face. He didn't answer. Malkin waited. Silence was a tool. Patience was a weapon. He'd learned this from his instructors. The quiet breaks people faster than questions. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Eichmann's breathing changed, became irregular. He was deciding something, calculating. Finally, he spoke. "I knew you would come eventually," Eichmann said. "The question was when, not if. I've been ready for 5 years." The answer made no sense. Men who expected capture didn't live in shanty houses, didn't work in factories. They ran, kept moving, built escape routes. Eichmann had done none of these things. He'd settled, made a life. His complacency had made him easy to find. Malkin straightened. Something else was happening, something beneath the surface. Eichmann wasn't afraid. The initial shock had worn off. Now he seemed almost calm. Men facing trial for genocide didn't become calm. They became desperate. They bargained. They pleaded. They offered information. Eichmann was doing none of these things. The bedroom door opened. Aharoni entered. His expression was grim. He carried a file. One of Eichmann's personal files from the house. The team had sent a second unit to search Garibaldi Street while the family was out. They'd had 20 minutes, grabbed everything they could. This file had been hidden under the floorboards. "We have a problem," Aharoni said. He opened the file. Inside were documents, letters, bank statements. One letter was marked with a red circle. Someone had already reviewed it, flagged it as critical. Malkin took the letter, read it. His hands started shaking. The letter was from a contact in Germany, dated 3 weeks earlier. It warned Eichmann, told him Israeli agents had been spotted in Buenos Aires, told him to prepare, to run or to hide or to fight. Eichmann had received this letter, had known they were coming, and had done nothing, had continued his routine, had walked down Garibaldi Street at exactly 7:40 p.m., had let himself be captured without any real resistance. He wanted to be caught, Malkin said. The realization landed like a punch. This was deliberate. Aharoni nodded. They both looked at Eichmann. The man on the bed hadn't moved, hadn't reacted to their discovery. His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, something worse. Satisfaction. "Gentlemen," Eichmann said. His German was precise, formal, the voice of an educated man. "You have no idea what you've actually caught." The team met in the kitchen. Midnight had passed. Eichmann was secured in the bedroom, sedated. The goggles stayed on. The restraints stayed tight. Isser Harel sat at the head of the table. The Mossad director had flown in from Tel Aviv 3 days earlier. He didn't usually run field operations. This one was different. Ben-Gurion wanted personal oversight. Harel's presence meant the operation had top priority. It also meant failure wasn't acceptable. Harel demanded an explanation of the letter. His voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of a man who'd sent agents to their deaths and slept fine afterward. Aharoni laid out the documents, the warning letter, bank statements showing large deposits, 20,000 Deutsche Marks in the past 6 months. The money came from a Swiss account, anonymous. The pattern suggested regular payments. Someone had been funding Eichmann's life in Argentina. Aharoni confirmed the protection, or former protection. The payments had stopped 2 months ago. Malkin studied the dates. Final payment in March. Warning letter in April. The timeline suggested a connection. Whoever had been protecting Eichmann had withdrawn support, then sent a warning. Then disappeared. Harel named it Odessa, Organisation der Ehemaligen SS Angehörigen, the network that smuggled Nazis out of Europe, the rat lines, through Italy, through Spain, across the Atlantic to South America. Odessa had moved hundreds of war criminals, given them new identities, new lives. But Odessa didn't warn people. They disappeared liabilities, a bullet in an alley, a drowning in the river, clean, final. The warning letter broke their pattern. Malkin voiced what they all realized. This wasn't Odessa. They would have killed him, not warned him. Harel agreed. Someone else was involved, someone with different motives, someone who wanted Eichmann alive, wanted him captured, wanted him on trial. The implications were troubling. If someone had orchestrated this capture, they had reasons. Intelligence agencies didn't help each other out of kindness. Information was currency. Eichmann knew things, names, operations, networks. Some of that information might be explosive. Harel asked Malkin the critical question. What did Eichmann want? Malkin had spent the most time near him, had heard his voice, sensed his attitude. Malkin's answer came immediately. A platform. Eichmann wanted the trial, wanted to speak, wanted the world to hear his version. The room went silent. Every agent understood. Eichmann would testify, would explain his actions, would justify the genocide. The trial would give him exactly what he wanted, a stage, an audience, millions watching. Rafi Eitan spoke up. The youngest in the room, he'd lost family in the camps. His entire village in Poland, gone. He proposed dumping Eichmann in the ocean, disappearing him. No trial, no stage. Harel refused. Ben-Gurion wanted the trial. The world needed to see Eichmann answer for his crimes. They would bring him back. Whatever he wanted to say, he'd say it in a courtroom, under oath, subject to cross-examination. Eitan insisted Eichmann would use the trial for propaganda, would claim he was following orders, just doing his job, the same defense they all used. and people would believe him. Some people always believed them. Malkin knew Eitan was right. Nuremberg had established the precedent. Following orders wasn't a defense. But Eichmann was smarter than the others, more articulate, more prepared. He'd had 15 years to craft his narrative. He wouldn't break easily. The meeting ended at 2 a.m. The agents dispersed. Guard rotations, perimeter security, communications monitoring. But Malkin took first watch in Eichmann's room. The sedative had worn off. Eichmann was awake, alert. The goggles prevented eye contact, but Malkin could feel the attention. Eichmann spoke first. Wondered aloud why Malkin thought he hadn't run. The letter had warned him. He'd had time, money, contacts. He could have disappeared. Malkin stayed silent. Eichmann wanted to talk, needed to talk. 15 years of hiding had been building pressure. Now it found release. Eichmann continued unprompted. He was 54, worked in a factory. His house had a tin roof that leaked. His children shared one bedroom. This wasn't the life he'd been promised. The complaint was bizarre. Eichmann spoke like a middle manager upset about a poor review. Not a war criminal facing execution. His tone carried entitlement, grievance. Malkin asked who had promised him better. Eichmann named Odessa. They'd said Argentina would be safe, that he'd be comfortable, that the past would stay buried. They'd lied. He was done hiding. The admission confirmed Harold's suspicion. Odessa had brought Eichmann to Argentina, had funded him, then abandoned him. Malkin pressed the timeline. Payment stopped 2 months ago, then the warning, then nothing. Eichmann's jaw tightened. Odessa wanted him dead. The warning was a courtesy, a chance to run before they sent someone. He'd chosen differently. The strategy became clear. Eichmann had decided capture beat assassination, the Mossad would protect him. Would need him alive for trial. He'd traded one imprisonment for another. But this one came with food, medical care, and eventually a platform. Malkin stated the obvious. Eichmann was using them. Eichmann corrected him. They were using each other. The Mossad wanted a war criminal. He wanted protection. And he wanted to speak. To make people understand what actually happened. The words sent ice through Malkin's chest. Eichmann genuinely believed his perspective mattered. The delusion was complete. He felt no guilt. Only frustration at being misunderstood. Malkin left, found Harold, relayed the conversation. Harold's assessment was grim. Eichmann was more dangerous than they'd thought, not broken. He'd calculated this, was treating the trial like a negotiation. Malkin proposed immediate interrogation. Get information while they had him, names, networks, everything about Odessa. Harold gave Malkin 12 hours. After that, they'd focus on transport. The El Al flight left in 9 days. Eichmann needed to be stable, coherent. If the interrogation broke him, they'd lost everything. Malkin returned to the bedroom. This interrogation would be different. No violence, no threats. But pride might work, vanity might, the need to be seen as competent. Eichmann had spent 15 years being nobody. That invisibility had worn him down. Malkin asked about the trains, the logistics. Eichmann's posture changed, straightened. The question engaged him. He explained the trains had been the most complex part. Everyone focused on the camps, on the killing. But the real challenge had been transportation, moving that many people across that much distance. The scheduling had been extraordinary. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. He wasn't describing a crime. He was describing a project solved. The moral dimension didn't exist for him. Only efficiency. Eichmann elaborated without prompting. 3 million people, multiple countries, different rail systems, different gauges. They'd coordinated with Wehrmacht logistics, with local authorities, with camp administrators. And it had to be done quietly. The operation needed to be invisible. Malkin felt his stomach turn. Eichmann spoke like an engineer discussing a bridge. The casual tone, the technical language, the complete absence of humanity. This was mechanical, something that reduced people to units. Malkin kept him talking about train numbers. Eichmann didn't remember exactly. Thousands. Records were destroyed, but he remembered the complexity, the elegance. They'd used existing infrastructure, existing schedules, slipped transport trains between regular freight. No one noticed. Malkin pressed about railroad workers, station masters, local officials. Eichmann acknowledged it freely. Of course they knew. Hundreds knew. Thousands probably. But knowing and acting were different. People knew. People did nothing. That was the real lesson, he claimed. Everyone blamed a few Nazis, but ordinary people made it possible. Ordinary bureaucrats followed procedures, stamped papers, and millions died. The statement was calculated. Eichmann was building his defense, spreading blame, making his role seem smaller. Malkin confronted him directly. Eichmann had organized it, had created the procedures, had written the orders. Eichmann's response was smooth. I implemented policy. Hitler gave the order. Himmler organized the SS. Heydrich designed the camps. I handled logistics, transportation, coordination. I was middle management. The lie was rehearsed, but the Mossad had files, documents, testimonies. Eichmann had been more than middle management. He'd been essential. The architect who made the entire system function. His contribution had been making it systematic, industrial, efficient. Malkin played his card. Odessa knew what Eichmann really did. That's why they'd cut him off. He was too visible, too important. If he talked, he'd expose everyone. Eichmann went silent. The observation had landed. Odessa hadn't abandoned him because he was unimportant. They'd abandoned him because he was too dangerous. Eichmann's voice changed when he finally spoke. Harder, bitter. He'd helped them after the war, had given them contacts, routes, money locations, had helped hundreds escape, and they'd repaid him by throwing him away, by sending assassins. Malkin demanded names. Everyone Eichmann had helped, where they went, what identities they used. Give up the network and the Mossad would protect him. Eichmann stated his terms. He needed assurances, in writing, signed by Israeli officials. No torture, no summary execution, a public trial, access to lawyers, medical care. Malkin had no authority for such deals, but the moment was fragile. Eichmann was close to breaking. Pushing too hard would shut him down. Malkin promised to get the assurances, but he needed proof first. One name, one location. Show them he was valuable. Eichmann smiled. Josef Mengele, the doctor from Auschwitz. You've been looking for him. You won't find him. He's in Paraguay. Under protection of President Stroessner. The government there knows exactly who he is. They're hiding him deliberately. The information was gold. Mengele was high priority. Malkin demanded proof. Details, address, contact information. Eichmann held firm. After he had his assurances, after Israel guaranteed his treatment, then he'd provide details, the entire network, every name, every location, but not before. Malkin left, found Harel, explained the situation. Harel stated the problem. Eichmann was manipulating them, playing for time, building leverage. Malkin proposed a counter-strategy. Don't give written assurances. Get what they could now. Promise nothing concrete. Keep him talking. By the time Eichmann realized they'd extracted everything, they'd be in Tel Aviv. Harel agreed. The approach was risky, but Eichmann was also desperate, also isolated, also facing execution. That desperation was exploitable. The next 8 hours were exhausting. Malkin and Aharoni tag-teamed the interrogation. They built a map. Names emerged. Locations crystallized. The Odessa network spread across South America. Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil, Chile. Hundreds of Nazis living under false names. Eichmann gave up details slowly, carefully. Each revelation was calculated. He was rationing information, stretching it out. But the agents were patient. By morning, they had 43 names, locations for 31, contact protocols, drop sites, code phrases, financial channels. The information would keep Mossad operations teams busy for years. Eichmann had given them everything he'd promised. More, actually. But something felt wrong. Malkin couldn't identify it precisely. Just an instinct, a sense that Eichmann had been too cooperative, as if this had been his plan all along. The team gathered again, reviewed the intelligence, cross-referenced it with existing files. Most names checked out. Others were new. Those names would require investigation. Some might be false. Harrell made the call. They needed to move Eichmann. The flight was in 8 days. But Argentine police were increasing patrols. Eichmann's wife had filed a missing person report. If they found the villa, everyone would be arrested. The plan had always included contingencies, multiple safe houses, multiple routes to the airport. They'd move Eichmann at night, transfer him closer to Ezeiza, hold him there until the final day, then drive straight to the plane. But moving him meant risk, the streets, the checkpoints, the possibility of being stopped. They'd need perfect documentation, perfect timing, perfect luck. The transfer happened at 3 a.m. They drugged Eichmann, not sedation this time, full anesthesia. The doctor administered propofol. Eichmann would be unconscious for 2 hours, long enough to move him, long enough to prevent him from memorizing the route. They wrapped him in blankets, made him look sick. A relative being rushed to a hospital. The cover story was simple, plausible. Argentine police wouldn't question a medical emergency at 3 a.m., not if the paperwork looked legitimate. The forger had worked overnight, created hospital transfer documents, emergency admission forms, everything stamped, everything signed. The signatures were fake. The stamps were real. Stolen from a clinic in San Telmo 2 weeks earlier. The theft had never been reported. They loaded Eichmann into an ambulance, a real ambulance, purchased through a shell company. The vehicle had proper markings, proper equipment, the siren worked, the lights worked, everything authentic except the crew. Malkin drove. Aharoni rode him back with the prisoner. The doctor stayed at the villa. Someone needed to maintain the appearance of occupation. Lights on, movement visible through windows. Argentine police were watching. Not this specific house yet, but the neighborhood. They were canvassing, asking questions. The route took them south, away from downtown. Through industrial zones, past warehouses. The roads were empty. Buenos Aires slept. Only shift workers were out. Only insomniacs. Only people with reasons to avoid daylight. They passed 2 police checkpoints. Both times, Malkin slowed. Let the officers see the ambulance markings, see the emergency lights. The officers waved them through. No one stops an ambulance. No one wants that responsibility. The second safe house was smaller. An apartment on the 5th floor, no yard, no garage, just concrete and locked doors. The building had 12 units. Most were empty. The landlord was sympathetic, not to Israel, to money. He'd been paid 6 months' rent in advance. Cash, no questions. They carried Eichmann up the stairs. The elevator was broken. Always broken. The landlord never fixed anything. The building was scheduled for demolition in 8 months. Inside, the apartment was sparse. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a hot plate, no phone line, no radio, no television, complete communication blackout. The windows faced an alley, no street view, no way for Eichmann to identify the location. They secured him to a bed. Different restraints this time, leather straps instead of rope, softer, less likely to leave marks. The trial would involve medical examinations. Lawyers would check for torture evidence. Any suspicious injuries would complicate things. The drugs wore off at 5 a.m. Eichmann woke confused, disoriented. The anesthesia left people foggy. The doctor had warned about this, said the confusion would last 30 minutes. During that window, people said things, revealed things. The guard dropped temporarily. Malkin sat beside the bed, waited. Watched Eichmann's eyes focus, watched awareness return. The moment of vulnerability was brief. Eichmann asked where they were. His German was slurred, imprecise. Malkin assured him he was safe. Still in Buenos Aires. Still protected. Nothing had changed. Eichmann disagreed. Something had changed. He could feel it. Different room, different sounds. They'd moved him. The observation was sharp. Too sharp for someone barely conscious. Eichmann was fighting through the fog faster than expected. His mind was strong, disciplined. Years of military training couldn't be fully suppressed by drugs, Malkin explained. Eichmann's wife was looking for him. She'd filed a report. Police were investigating. They'd moved him for security, for his protection. Eichmann's response was bitter. They meant their own protection. They were worried about being caught, about the operation failing. They didn't care about him. Malkin corrected him. They cared about the trial, about justice, about making sure Eichmann faced his crimes in court. That required keeping him alive, keeping him healthy. So, yes, they cared about him, but not the way he thought. Eichmann laughed. The sound was harsh, raw. He kept calling it justice, as if this was about law, about procedure. This was about revenge, he claimed, about making an example. The trial was theater, political theater. The verdict was already decided. Malkin asked why Eichmann was cooperating then. Why give up the names? Why tell them about Odessa? If he thought it was all predetermined, why help them? Eichmann's expression changed, became calculating. Because I want my story heard. Because history will be written about this. About me. About what happened. I want my version on record. Not just the propaganda. Not just the accusations. My explanation. My perspective. The delusion persisted. Eichmann genuinely believed his perspective had value, believed future generations would vindicate him, would understand his choices. The belief wasn't just hope, it was conviction. Deep, unshakable. Malkin pointed out that Nuremberg hadn't vindicated anyone. Every defendant had claimed they were following orders. Every defendant said they had no choice. The judges hadn't accepted it then. They wouldn't accept it now. Eichmann disagreed. Nuremberg had been rushed, emotional, too close to the war, too much anger, too much desire for revenge. But time had passed. 15 years. People were calmer now, more rational. They could hear his explanation without immediate fury. They could consider the context, the pressure, the reality. Malkin felt anger rise, forced it down. Emotion was weakness in interrogation. Eichmann was trying to provoke him, trying to shift the dynamic. Malkin changed subject, asked about Hungary. 1944. Eichmann had personally supervised the deportations. 400,000 people in 8 weeks. That wasn't following orders. That was initiative. That was efficiency beyond requirements. Eichmann's jaw tightened. The topic bothered him. Hungary was different. He claimed it was complicated. The situation was unstable. The government was wavering. If they hadn't acted fast, Hungary would have protected their Jews, hidden them, saved them. They'd had a narrow window. He'd used it. Malkin pressed harder. Eichmann had exceeded his orders. His superiors wanted the deportations done quietly, slowly. He'd done them fast, publicly, made it impossible to hide, made it impossible for the Hungarian government to claim ignorance. He'd forced their complicity. Eichmann's response was defensive. He'd done his job, had done it well, efficiently. That's what he'd been trained for, what he'd been promoted for. Excellence in execution. That's what the SS valued, what Germany needed. The pride was still there, still intact. Even discussing genocide, Eichmann spoke with professional satisfaction. The moral disconnect was complete, total. He'd separated the act from its meaning. Malkin stood, walked to the window. The alley outside was dark, empty. Dawn was still an hour away. He thought about his sister, about her children, about the last letter before the trains came. Then nothing. Silence. Auschwitz, the gas chambers, all of them gone. He turned back to Eichmann. The man on the bed looked tired, uncomfortable, but not broken, not defeated, still fighting, still calculating, still trying to control the narrative. Malkin confronted him about the Odessa information. Some of it had been wrong. They'd checked. 3 names didn't exist. 2 locations were empty. He'd lied. Eichmann smiled. He'd given them mostly truth. Some misdirection. That was standard procedure. They knew this. They would do the same. Protect your own people while appearing to cooperate. Give enough to seem valuable. Hold back. Enough to maintain leverage. The admission was calculated. Eichmann was showing his intelligence, demonstrating that he understood tradecraft, that he wasn't a simple bureaucrat. Malkin stated they'd verify everything, sort truth from lies. It just took time. And they had time. 8 more days until the flight. Eichmann corrected him. They had 8 days to keep him alive. Odessa knew he was missing. They were looking. They had people in Argentina. Good people. Trained people. If they found this location, they'd come. Not to rescue him. To kill him. To prevent him from talking at trial. From exposing the network. The threat was real. Malkin knew it. The entire team knew it. Odessa had resources. Had reach. Had motivation to silence Eichmann permanently. The Mossad's advantage was speed. Was surprise. Was the fact that Odessa didn't know exactly where they were. But that advantage was temporary. Eroding. Malkin assured him they were protected. The location was secure, unknown. They had surveillance. They had contingency plans. Odessa wouldn't find him. Eichmann's response was cold. They hoped Odessa wouldn't find him. Hope wasn't strategy. Hope wasn't security. Hope was what people relied on when they had no better options. A knock at the door. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The recognition signal. Malkin opened it. Aharoni stood outside. His expression was grim. He carried a newspaper. Folded. A headline visible. Aharoni announced the problem. Malkin took the newspaper. The headline was in Spanish. German immigrant missing. Police investigate possible kidnapping. Below it, a photograph. Not of Eichmann. Of the street. Garibaldi Street. The exact location where they'd grabbed him. Someone had taken a photo, had sold it to the press. The article described the scene, a briefcase left in the street. Papers scattered, glasses broken on the pavement. Witnesses reported seeing a struggle, seeing a man forced into a car, seeing the car speed away. The license plate was partially visible in the photograph. Blurred, but readable if enhanced. Malkin asked about the car disposal. Aharoni confirmed it had been burned 2 days ago, in a scrapyard outside the city. Nothing left. But the plate number was out there, in the newspaper. Police would trace it, would find the registration, would follow the trail. Malkin reminded him the registration was false. Shell company. Untraceable. Aharoni disagreed. Nothing was completely untraceable. Given enough time, enough resources. Argentine intelligence was capable, motivated. If they suspected Israeli involvement, they'd pursue it. And if they found them, this became an international incident. Malkin looked at Eichmann. The German had heard everything. His expression showed satisfaction. Not fear, not concern. Satisfaction. The situation was deteriorating. Time was running out. And Eichmann knew it. Knew the pressure was building. Knew the Mossad's window was closing. 5 days, Eichmann said. You have 5 days maximum. Then Argentine authorities will have enough evidence to move. They'll raid locations, question suspects, close the airport. You'll be trapped, and I'll be freed or killed. Either way, your mission fails. Malkin made an instant decision. They'd leave in 3 days. The flight could be moved up. They'd compress the schedule. Get Eichmann on a plane before the investigation closed in. Aharoni objected. The El Al flight was cover. Part of a diplomatic mission, anniversary celebration. Moving it early raised questions, drew attention. They needed the scheduled flight, needed the crowd, needed the legitimate reason for an Israeli plane at Aziza. Malkin understood the problem. The operation's success depended on hiding Eichmann among legitimate passengers, among diplomats and staff returning to Tel Aviv. An early departure would isolate them, would make them conspicuous. Malkin proposed improving security instead. Double the guards, increase surveillance, fortify the position, hold for 5 more days, make it work. Eichmann laughed again. That harsh sound. You're improvising, making decisions without authorization, without plan. This operation is falling apart, and you know it. Harrell arrived 6 hours later. He'd read the newspaper, seen the photograph, understood the implications. His face showed nothing. No anger, no concern, just the calculated neutrality of a professional dealing with a crisis. He announced the strategy. They would accelerate. The flight stayed on schedule, but they'd move Eichmann to the airport early, hide him there in the terminal, in plain sight. The plan was audacious. Insane, actually. Airports were controlled spaces, security everywhere. Police, customs, military. Hiding a kidnapped Nazi war criminal in an airport terminal seemed impossible. But Harol's expression suggested otherwise. He'd thought this through. Had a method, Harol explained. El Al had a private lounge for crew rest for diplomatic guests. The lounge was technically Israeli sovereign territory. Argentine authorities couldn't enter without permission. Without diplomatic incident. They'd put Eichmann there, keep him sedated, dress him as crew. When the flight boarded, he'd walk on with everyone else. Malkin saw the logic. The lounge was a blind spot, a gap in Argentine jurisdiction. Once inside, Eichmann was effectively in Israel, protected by diplomatic immunity, protected by international law. The Argentines could protest, could demand entry, but actually forcing their way in would create problems. Aharoni asked the critical question. How would they get Eichmann into the lounge? Security checked everyone entering the terminal. Documents, credentials. They were looking for him now. His face was in the newspaper. Harol corrected him. Ricardo Klement's face was in the newspaper. A factory worker. A nobody. Security wasn't looking for an El Al crew member. They were looking for a kidnapping victim. Someone who looked frightened, desperate. They'd make Eichmann look comfortable, professional, part of the crew. He'd walk past security because he belonged there. The concept was sound. Security personnel looked for anomalies, for people who didn't fit, but someone who belonged, someone confident, someone with proper credentials and proper attitude. That person became invisible, became part of the background. Harol laid out the requirements. They needed 48 hours to prepare. Forged crew credentials, proper uniforms, practice. Eichmann needed to act the part, walk correctly, respond to questions appropriately. Any hesitation, any confusion, security would notice, security would investigate. Malkin raised the obvious problem. Eichmann wouldn't cooperate. Why would he? The plan required his participation, his active help. He gained nothing by making this easy. Harol disagreed. Eichmann gained survival. Odessa wanted him dead. The Mossad wanted him alive. That was leverage. That was motivation. They'd explain the situation. Make it clear. Help them or die in Argentina. In an apartment. Shot by his own people. No trial. No platform. No chance to speak. Just silence. Forever. Eichmann was brought into the discussion. The goggles were removed. He blinked against the light. His eyes adjusted slowly. He looked at each man, studying them, evaluating. His expression remained neutral, curious, not afraid. Harol laid out the plan, spoke directly. No deception, no sugarcoating. The situation was deteriorating. Argentine police were closing in. Odessa was hunting him. Time was running out. The only viable escape was cooperation. Active participation in his own extraction. Eichmann stated the absurdity. They wanted him to walk into an airport, pretend to be crew, board a plane to Israel, to his trial, to his probable execution, and they thought he'd do this willingly. Harol presented the alternative: death here, today, tomorrow, within the week. Odessa had assets in Buenos Aires. They knew he was missing, knew he was talking, giving up names, exposing the network. They couldn't allow that, couldn't let him reach trial. So they'd find him, kill him, dump his body somewhere it wouldn't be found for months. Eichmann accused them of bluffing. Odessa wouldn't kill him. He was valuable, knew too much. About too many people. His death exposed them more than his testimony. Harol explained the logic. Eichmann's death ended the exposure. His testimony at trial would be public, recorded, permanent. Every name he gave, every operation he described, that information would live forever. But if he died now, before trial, before testimony, the information died with him. Odessa would take that trade, take it gladly. Eichmann's confidence wavered. Not much, just a flicker, a moment of uncertainty. He was calculating, running scenarios, weighing probabilities. His survival instinct fought against his pride, against his desire for the platform. Eichmann demanded guarantees, written guarantees, that they wouldn't kill him once airborne, once over the ocean. A tragic accident. Prisoner tried to escape. Had to be restrained. Died in the struggle. Very convenient. Very clean. Harel's response was pragmatic. They needed Eichmann alive. Ben-Gurion needed him alive. Israel needed him alive. The trial only worked with him in the defendant's chair. His death made them look guilty. Made them look like assassins. Like they feared what he might say. The entire operation became worthless if he died. The logic was sound. Eichmann recognized this. The Israelis had invested too much. Risked too much. Killing him now would waste everything. Would turn a propaganda victory into a propaganda disaster. Eichmann insisted on written terms, signed guarantees, from Ben-Gurion personally. No torture, no summary execution. A fair trial, access to lawyers of his choosing, medical care, humane treatment, non-negotiable. Harel stated the reality. Eichmann was negotiating from weakness. He was in an apartment, restrained, surrounded by armed agents, in a country that wanted him caught, with an organization that wanted him dead. He had no leverage, no power, no ability to dictate terms. Eichmann disagreed. I have one power, the power to refuse, to resist, to make your plan impossible. You need my cooperation, need me to walk into that airport voluntarily, looking calm, looking natural. I can destroy that, can make myself conspicuous, can alert security, can force you to abort. That's my leverage, my only leverage, but it's enough. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the truth. Eichmann was right. Dragging an unconscious man through airport security was impossible. Carrying a struggling prisoner was impossible. The plan only worked with voluntary participation, with convincing performance. Harel stepped outside, made a phone call, secure line to Tel Aviv. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When he returned, his expression had changed. Still neutral, still controlled. But something had shifted. Some decision had been made. Harel agreed. Eichmann would get his guarantees. Written, signed, from Ben-Gurion's office, delivered before they left for the airport. Everything he asked for. Fair trial, lawyers, medical care, humane treatment. But Eichmann needed to understand something. These guarantees covered his treatment in custody, his process at trial. They didn't cover the verdict. They didn't cover the sentence, if found guilty, if sentenced to death. These guarantees wouldn't save him. Eichmann accepted the terms. He wasn't asking for immunity, just process, just fairness, just the chance to present his case, his defense, his explanation. That's all I've ever wanted. The lie was transparent. Eichmann wanted more than fairness, wanted vindication, wanted history to judge him differently. The trial was his vehicle, his last chance, his only chance. The next 36 hours were intense. The forger created perfect credentials. LL crew identification, security clearances, all the documentation needed to pass airport screening. The uniform was acquired. Genuine LL issue. Stolen from a laundry service that handled airline contracts. Eichmann was trained, taught how to walk, how to stand, how to respond to questions. The Mossad had studied airline crew behavior, had documented patterns, had identified the subtle markers that made someone look authentic. Posture, pace, eye contact, hand positions, everything had meaning. Malkin explained Eichmann's role: flight engineer, technical crew, not cabin staff. He wouldn't interact with passengers, wouldn't speak unless spoken to. He'd carry a flight bag, keep his eyes forward, walk with purpose. He belonged there, had done this 1,000 times. This was routine, boring, just another flight home. They practiced, ran through scenarios, security asking questions, customs wanting documents, random searches, equipment failures requiring explanations. Eichmann needed responses for everything, needed to stay calm under pressure, needed to be convincing. The German was a good student, learned quickly. His military training helped, his intelligence helped. He understood the stakes, understood that one mistake meant capture, meant failure, meant death by Odessa instead of trial in Jerusalem. His survival depended on performance. So he performed. The guarantees arrived, 3 pages, official letterhead, multiple signatures, Ben-Gurion's signature at the bottom. The document promised everything Eichmann had requested: fair treatment, legal representation, public trial, medical care. The language was formal, precise, legally binding under international law. Eichmann read it carefully, 3 times, looking for loopholes, for vague language, for escape clauses that would invalidate the promises. He found none. The document was solid, comprehensive, exactly what he'd demanded. Eichmann accepted it, folded the document, tucked it inside his shirt, against his chest. Protected. He'd cooperate. He'd play flight engineer. He'd get on their plane. And when they landed in Tel Aviv, they'd honor these guarantees. Harel gave his word, Israel's word. That meant something. That carried weight. They weren't like the people Eichmann had worked for. They kept their promises. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication, with judgment. Eichmann's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just nodded, accepted the terms, accepted his fate. They moved at dawn. 3 cars, different routes, converging on Aziza International Airport from different directions. Eichmann rode in the second car, dressed in uniform, carrying the flight bag. The goggles were gone. The restraints were gone. He looked like what he was pretending to be: a tired crew member heading home after a long assignment. The airport was busy, morning flights departing, business travelers, tourists, families. The crowd was perfect, provided cover, provided anonymity, provided chaos that hid intentions. Security was present, but stretched thin, watching everything, seeing nothing. They entered through the crew entrance, separate from main terminal, less security, less scrutiny. The credentials were checked, scanned, approved. The security officer barely looked at faces. Just documents. Just photographs on badges. Eichmann's fake photo matched close enough. Close enough for a bored guard at 6 a.m. Close enough to pass. Inside, they moved quickly. Through corridors, past maintenance areas, past storage rooms. The El Al lounge was at the end. Private, secure. The door required a key. A special key. Only airline management had copies. Harel had acquired one. The lounge was empty. Good. No witnesses, no complications. They locked the door behind them, posted guards outside, settled in for the wait. 4 hours until boarding. 4 hours of vulnerability. 4 hours where everything could still go wrong. Eichmann sat in a chair, calm, almost peaceful. He'd made his choice, committed to the plan. Now he just had to execute, had to maintain the performance, had to walk onto that plane and disappear into Israeli custody. Forever. Malkin observed the change. Eichmann was quiet. No complaints, no demands, no attempts to negotiate better terms. That was unusual. Not the pattern he'd shown. Eichmann looked at him. Really looked. Not with hostility, not with fear. I'm done negotiating, done fighting, done running. 15 years is enough. I'm tired. Tired of hiding, tired of pretending, tired of being someone I'm not. Ricardo Klement was never real, never me, just a mask, a role. I'm ready to stop playing roles. The admission was unexpected, genuine. For the first time since capture, Eichmann seemed vulnerable, human. The facade had cracked. Not broken, just cracked. Enough to show something underneath, something worn down. Something that wanted rest. Malkin told him he'd get rest in prison. After the trial, after the verdict, after everything was finished. He'd have time, lots of time, to think, to reflect, to face what he'd done. Eichmann's response was chilling. I've already faced it. Every day for 15 years, people think I'm running from guilt, from conscience. They're wrong. I'm running from consequences, from punishment. That's different. I know what I did. I remember all of it. Every train, every order, every hurry signature. The memories don't fade, don't soften. They're always there, always present. That's my real prison, the one I carry with me. Malkin wanted to believe him, wanted to think Eichmann felt remorse, felt guilt. But the words didn't match. The tone didn't match. Eichmann was describing burden, not remorse, describing weight, not regret. He was tired of carrying the past, but not sorry for creating it. A knock at the door, the recognition signal. Aharoni entered. His expression was urgent, troubled. He carried another newspaper, fresh edition. Published an hour earlier, the headline made Malkin's blood freeze. Israeli agents suspected in kidnapping, government demands explanation. The article named no names, provided no evidence, just accusations. Anonymous sources claiming Israeli intelligence had kidnapped a German citizen, claiming the operation was state-sponsored, claiming diplomatic immunity was being abused. The Argentine government was demanding answers, demanding access to all Israeli facilities, demanding immediate investigation. Aharoni confirmed the problem. Someone had talked. Someone inside Argentine intelligence had connected the dots. Factory worker disappears. Israeli agents in the country. El Al flight scheduled. The pattern was obvious. Harrell asked the critical question. Did they know where the team was? Not yet, Aharoni reported, but they were mobilizing. Police were being briefed. Airport security was being reinforced. They'd lock down the terminal soon. Search every room, every lounge, every space where someone could hide. Harrell checked his watch. 3 hours until boarding. 3 hours that suddenly felt impossible. The plan had required stealth, required invisibility. The newspaper had destroyed both. Now they were exposed, hunted, trapped in an airport lounge with a war criminal and no viable exit strategy. Harrell made the call. They'd board early. Get on the plane now, before security cordons formed, before they realized the team was here. Aharoni objected. The plane wasn't ready. Still refueling. Still loading. Crew was still arriving. They couldn't board passengers for another 2 hours minimum. Harrell revised. They wouldn't board as passengers. They'd board as crew. As maintenance, as cargo handlers. Get Eichmann onto that plane however possible. Once he was aboard, once the doors closed, they were protected. The aircraft was sovereign Israeli territory. Malkin understood the risk. Moving now meant moving visibly, meant crossing the tarmac in daylight, meant being seen by dozens of airport workers, by security, by police. Any one of them could sound an alarm. Malkin proposed a distraction, something to pull security away, to create chaos, give them a window to move. Aharoni asked what kind of distraction. A medical emergency, Malkin explained. Something in the main terminal, something requiring immediate response. Every security officer, every paramedic. Everyone's attention focused elsewhere while they crossed the tarmac. The idea had merit. Airports responded to medical emergencies with overwhelming force. A heart attack, a seizure, a diabetic collapse. Any of those would trigger immediate response. Would create the chaos they needed. Harrell asked who would fake it. Eitan, Malkin answered. He was young, healthy. No one would suspect. He'd collapse in the main terminal, near the departure gates. Security would respond. Paramedics would respond. Everyone would move. They'd use that window. Harrell made the call, positioned Eitan in the main terminal, waiting. When he got the signal, he'd collapse. Make it convincing, make it urgent. Create exactly the chaos they needed. The timing would have to be perfect. Harrell gave the timeline. 10 minutes. They'd move in 10 minutes. Eichmann would walk between them, calm, professional. They were crew heading to the aircraft. Normal pre-flight procedure. Anyone asking questions would be told they were conducting security inspection. Standard protocol. They prepared, checked credentials, adjusted uniforms, made sure everything looked authentic. Eichmann stood, stretched. His hands were shaking slightly. Not fear, adrenaline. The moment was close. His ticket to Jerusalem, his platform, his trial. Malkin reminded him. He was tired, bored. This was routine. He'd done this 1,000 times. His mind was on home, on rest, on anything except the fact that he was a kidnapped war criminal walking through an Argentine airport. Eichmann nodded. His expression shifted, became neutral, became the mask of a working professional at the end of a long shift. The transformation was remarkable, complete. The signal came. Eitan had collapsed. The distraction was active. Security was responding. The window was open. They unlocked the door, stepped into the corridor. Empty. Good. They moved quickly, but not frantically. purpose without panic. The crew entrance to the tarmac was ahead. 50 meters. The door required credentials. Harold had those. They passed 2 maintenance workers. The workers glanced up, saw uniforms, saw credentials, saw nothing suspicious. Went back to their conversation. About soccer, about weather. The tarmac door opened. Heat poured in. Buenos Aires summer was brutal. The concrete radiated warmth. Shimmered. Aircraft were everywhere, taking off, landing, taxiing. The El Al plane was 200 meters away. A Boeing 707, registration 4XAGB. The aircraft that would carry them home, that would carry Eichmann to trial, that would complete the mission. But 200 meters of open tarmac stood between them and safety. They walked, maintained the pace, not fast, not slow, just purposeful. Other crew members were visible, moving between aircraft, conducting inspections, loading cargo. Everyone had somewhere to be. 3 more crew members blended perfectly. Halfway across, a security vehicle appeared, driving fast, heading toward the main terminal, toward Eichmann's location. The distraction was working. A voice called out behind them, Spanish, authoritative, ordering them to stop. Malkin's hand moved toward his weapon, hidden under his jacket, ready, but Harold caught his arm, stopped him. Violence now would destroy everything, would turn this into an international incident. They stopped, turned. A security supervisor approached. Older man, 40s, suspicious expression. He'd seen something, noticed something, some detail that didn't fit. The supervisor demanded their credentials, still in Spanish. His hand rested on his sidearm, not threatening, just ready. Harold provided his documents, calm, unhurried. The supervisor examined them, compared photos to faces. Everything matched. Everything was perfect. But he wasn't satisfied. Something still bothered him. The supervisor asked where they were going. Harold explained. Pre-flight inspection, security protocol. They were checking the aircraft before passengers boarded. The supervisor stated he wasn't informed. Nothing on his schedule. Nothing in the system. Harold offered a logical explanation. Last-minute addition. After the newspaper reports. Extra security measures. The supervisor should understand. The explanation made sense. Logical. After accusations of Israeli involvement in a kidnapping, enhanced security seemed reasonable. Expected even. But the supervisor wasn't convinced. His eyes moved to Eichmann, studied him. The supervisor pointed at Eichmann, said he hadn't seen him before. Asked if he was new, Harold confirmed. Transfer from Tel Aviv. Temporary assignment, covering for sick crew member. His paperwork should be in the system. The supervisor pulled a radio from his belt. About to call it in, about to verify, about to discover the documents were fake. That Eichmann wasn't in any system. That this entire story was fabricated. A voice crackled over the radio. Urgent. Panicked. Medical emergency at Gate 7. All units respond. Repeat. All units respond. Man down. Possible cardiac arrest. The supervisor hesitated, torn between his suspicion and his duty. The emergency demanded response, but these 3 men demanded investigation. He couldn't do both. Had to choose. The voice repeated, Gate 7. They needed everyone. Now. The supervisor made his decision, clipped the radio back, ordered them to finish their inspection, then report to the operations office. He wanted their paperwork verified. Understood. Harold confirmed, understood. The supervisor ran toward the terminal, toward the emergency, toward Eichmann's performance. They had maybe 5 minutes before he returned. 5 minutes before questions resumed. 5 minutes to get Eichmann onto that plane and behind Israeli protection. They moved fast now. The pretense dropped. Speed mattered more than appearance. The aircraft loomed ahead. The boarding stairs were deployed. Crew was loading cargo, loading supplies. The captain was visible in the cockpit window, running pre-flight checks. They reached the stairs, started climbing. Eichmann's legs were weak, shaking. The stress was catching up. Adrenaline depleting. Malkin grabbed his arm, supported him, kept him moving, 1 step, another. The aircraft door was 10 feet away, 8 feet, 6 feet. A shout from behind. The supervisor had returned, had realized something was wrong, was calling for backup. Security vehicles were converging, coming fast, sirens activated. Harrell ordered them inside. Now! Malkin shoved Eichmann through the aircraft door. The German stumbled, caught himself, collapsed into a seat. Safe, protected, on Israeli territory, legally untouchable. Harrell followed. Aharoni followed. The rest of the team materialized. They'd been hiding on the aircraft, waiting, ready. 8 agents total. Enough to defend the aircraft if necessary. Enough to hold against Argentine security until the situation could be negotiated. The captain appeared, stated the problem. Airport authority was demanding they open the doors. They wanted to search the aircraft. They were claiming the team had kidnapped someone. Harrell refused. This aircraft was Israeli sovereign territory. They had no jurisdiction here, no authority to search. Tell them to contact their foreign ministry. Tell them this was a diplomatic matter. The captain reported another problem. They were blocking the runway. The aircraft couldn't take off, couldn't even move. They were trapped here. The standoff lasted 4 hours. Argentine police surrounded the aircraft. Military units were deployed. Television cameras arrived. The entire incident was broadcast live. The world watched. Israel claimed diplomatic immunity. Argentina claimed violation of sovereignty. Neither side would back down. Inside the aircraft, Eichmann sat quietly, watched through the window, watched the chaos he'd caused, the international crisis his capture had triggered. His expression was unreadable. Not satisfaction, not fear, something else, something closer to fascination. Malkin asked if it had been worth it. All of this, the running, the hiding, the capture, the trial he was about to face. Was any of it worth it? Eichmann considered the question. Long silence. Then he spoke. I did what I was trained to do, what I was ordered to do, what my country required of me. The outcome doesn't change that, doesn't invalidate the duty. I served. I followed orders. I completed my mission. That has value. That means something. Whether others understand that doesn't matter. The answer was chilling. After everything. After capture. After exposure. After facing trial and probable execution. Eichmann still believed he'd been right. Still believed he'd done his duty. The delusion was absolute. Unshakable. The diplomatic negotiations concluded at sunset. A compromise was reached. Argentina would allow the aircraft to depart, would not board, would not search. In exchange, Israel would acknowledge the operation, would admit to Eichmann's capture, would face international criticism, would accept diplomatic consequences. Ben-Gurion agreed. The acknowledgement was acceptable. The consequences were manageable. Getting Eichmann to Jerusalem was all that mattered. Everything else was secondary. The runway was cleared. The engines started. The aircraft began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Building speed. The wheels lifted. They were airborne. Argentina disappeared below them. The Atlantic stretched ahead. And in the back of the aircraft, restrained but alive, Adolf Eichmann began his final journey. The trial would last 8 months. Eichmann would testify, would explain his actions, would claim he was following orders, would insist he bore no personal responsibility. The judges would reject every argument, would find him guilty on all counts, would sentence him to death by hanging. He was executed on May 31st, 1962, 2 years after his capture. His body was cremated. The ashes were scattered at sea, beyond Israeli territorial waters, so that no country would have to claim him, so that no grave could become a shrine, so that nothing of Adolf Eichmann would remain. But the trial achieved something else, something unexpected. The testimonies of survivors were recorded, preserved. The documentation of genocide was presented in exhaustive detail. The world watched. The world learned. A generation that had tried to forget was forced to remember. Eichmann wanted a platform. He got one. But the platform didn't vindicate him. It condemned him. The trial didn't spread his message. It exposed his crimes. His careful rationalizations collapsed under scrutiny. His claims of innocence shattered against evidence. His explanation convinced no one. The final revelation came during his last words, standing before execution. Given chance to speak, everyone expected defiance, expected him to maintain his position, to claim innocence one last time. Instead, he said something different, something that haunted those who heard it. "After a short while, gentlemen, we shall all meet again. Such is the fate of all men. Long live Germany, long live Argentina, long live Austria. These are the three countries with which I have been most connected and which I shall not forget. I greet my wife, my family, and my friends. I am ready." No remorse, no apology, no acknowledgement of his victims. Just protocol, just formality, just the bureaucrat to the very end. He faced death the same way he'd organized genocide, with detached professionalism, with mechanical precision, with complete absence of human feeling. The architect of genocide died as he'd lived, following procedure, maintaining form, refusing to see the humanity he'd destroyed, refusing to acknowledge the evil he'd served, refusing to accept that some orders should never be followed, that some duties should never be performed, that some missions should never be completed. The Eichmann kidnapping proved something to the world, that the past doesn't disappear, that crimes don't fade, that justice delayed isn't justice denied. It can take 15 years. It can take a continent. It can take an entire intelligence agency. But eventually the reckoning comes, and when it does, there's nowhere left to hide.